Good morning, everyone. Um, I hope that these life stories are not boring everybody. I never know. But I know my grandchildren, one of them told me, oh, yeah, I read them all the time. So it's kind of interesting. Um, but documenting your life in public can be a little weird, um, you know. So I'm going to continue. We've now gotten out of the military service. I took a bus cross country. I went to see family in Texas. I still have a brother and a sister in Texas, whom I haven't seen for years because I never seem to get around to it. And they don't either. You know, we're all busy living our lives. None of us are wealthy. So um, I visited family, but my destination was Smyrna, Delaware. My best girlfriend, who lived in San Francisco with me, after everybody seemed to have left, gone their own ways, and she was stuck with this apartment she couldn't afford, so she moved back home. She left San Francisco and she moved back home. So I went to live with her. She wanted me to come, and I said yeah, and I wanted to come. I wanted to go. And in Smyrna, Delaware, she had a job with Litton Industries. Litton Industries had just started a new plant up there, and they were circuit board creators and makers. So they made circuit boards for microwaves, which were brand new at the time. Microwaves were huge and weighed a ton because we had one. So there was a new market, and they made circuit boards. And the company offered me a job while I was there. And of course, I accepted because, I needed work. And my husband came and he started the circuit board. He was 19 years old and he was brilliant, brilliant with circuit boards. He created them. Everything you ever wanted to know about a circuit board, he could tell you at 19. And he started their circuit board division at 19, running it, setting it up. And then he was going to go back to Springfield, Missouri, where he was from. And we met and fell in love. And I married my husband in Springfield, Missouri. We lived there and we had our son. And I bought a house on the VA loan. My first house cost $99,200. It was a two-bedroom, one bath with a living room and a dining room and a kitchen and a back porch. And I had with it also came an extra lot where I grew vegetables and I canned and froze. I went to fields and I picked corn in corn season and froze it. And I picked tomatoes and other things and I canned. Learned how to can. I had an 80-year-old woman beside me who was marvelous. Her husband was a silver miner in Nevada, and she lived in a tent for like I think it was 10 years, she said, but I'm not positive about that. And so she taught me a lot. I remember I'm only like 19 years old, so I just soaked up all her information. She taught me all about canning and vegetable growing and freezing corn correctly and freezing vegetables. I mean, it was an incredible experience for me. And then mistakes were made, things happened, and we divorced. We were both at fault. Um, and that's just the way it is. Most people don't realize they get angry or they get hurt, and those are all things that we feel. But we have to take responsibility for our actions too. And Ed and I talked, and it was 50-50, I think. I think it was 50-50. Mistakes made on both sides. So then I moved to Houston, Texas, and my son, I got custody of him, and he was about 8, and he'd go for his dad's for summer, then he'd come back, and I want to be with dad, I want to live with dad. So I talked to Ed, I talked to just, I said, you're 8 years old, and I did decide that my son at 8 needed his father, and I am so grateful that I did make that decision. It was the worst decision, the hardest decision I've ever made in my life was to give up custody of my son. Um, I was so devoted to him. And I think that after that, I was in such a mood. That's when I started joining um, that men's club and all the dating and all of that. Was when my son went and lived with his father. And thank goodness, I've told you many times, if you love someone enough, you let them go. And I loved my son enough to let him live with his father. It was the best decision I've ever made. I didn't know that at the time, but his father died 6 years later when he was 14. He had those 6 precious years with his father, and those were important years for him. And I'm happy that I made the decision. Many people judged me and thought I was a horrible mother, and how could you do that? But I felt my son needed his father, and that's where he wanted to be, and I let him go. And of course, 14, he was living back with me, and his father's death was very hard on him. So I had my son, and I had a job with World Savings and Loan. I started as a secretary, which I was an accountant, but I was the secretary for the controller. And then I moved through the ranks to supervisor of AP. I wrote programs um, and went to school at night for computer programming because they were talking about putting in the first mainframe for World Savings and Loan. I mean, we didn't have debit cards then, okay, guys? So it wasn't just Bill Gates and Steve Jobs that existed. There were many people like me who were going to school at night to learn how to talk to the people who were the IT people. They spoke a different language. Nobody understood them. Upper management didn't want to deal with them at all. So my department was chosen as the first department to go online with a mainframe and to work out all the kinks. So we wrote all the policies, we installed everything. Um, I knew that computer mainframe, what it could do inside and out. By the time it took 2 years, and I worked 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days. Sometimes I would take a couple weeks off. I just would get tired, or a weekend off, but mainly 2 years I worked 7 days a week, lots of 12-hour days. So I was promoted to manager of the AP department, and I had the largest department at World. Um, it was a wonderful job. I loved World Savings and Loan. They no longer exist. They were the number one profitable savings and loan in the United States. Mr. and Mrs. Sandler were the owners, and Mr. Sandler and Mrs. Sandler would, and I forget who the president was, but he would fly to see the president and talk to the president about finance. So they were well thought of in the United States as well as in San Francisco, and they were, to me, very good. I left after 10 years and went on my own into my own business, and I installed. I had two businesses. I had my vintage clothing, which didn't make a lot of money, so I still had to support it. So my accounting supported my vintage clothing, and I would go to small companies, nonprofits. I did a nonprofit, two manufacturers. Um, uh, one at Expo put on conventions. I did theirs. I did a yacht club. I just did all kinds of various businesses, and I would install. I was an expert in two different accounting systems, and as well as the mainframe. And I would install accounting systems, set them up, train their people, and monitor all their accounting systems for them, and make sure they were running right, and reconcile their year end for the CPAs to come in and do all the work. So I did that for years. And then I finally just did my own business, which was vintage clothing. And I've talked about all the movie stars. You've heard me talking about it. Um, and I invested everything I had into the vintage clothing. And I had it in my house a lot, my garage. I moved it in. It just kept growing and growing. And I moved it and put it in a unit, a storage unit. Kept growing, growing. And so a lady I had met who became a friend, talked about going into an old grocery store. It was 40,000 square feet, and she was going to get several of us, and I was going to be one of the main partners, and we were going to open up a vintage clothing and vintage antique store, which we did, and I had insurance on it in the house. It was always insured. I decided she said you need to get insurance on it for the store. It's very difficult to do for vintage clothing. And I was working with a company at the time, and I was taking pictures, and I was doing a full inventory, goods, prices, pictures of the most expensive things. And I want to say 2 weeks. I think I was there a little over 2 weeks, and the insurance guy was coming out, and we had a once in a lifetime storm, and my store was in Napa, and the roof caved in with all the water, destroyed my whole business. So everything was destroyed. I had nothing, and I had no insurance. So I had to start over again. And at 58, I just had to start over again. It's that simple, guys. Start it over again. I've given you, the movie stars that I met, and many things happen with the business, rivals, and this and that. But you work a lot of hours, and so I'm going to end right there. So once in a lifetime storm, and all the merchandise destroyed, and I still had my accounting business, which I could do, and that'll be next time. So thank you very much. I hope you give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.